The assumption by way too many people is that your tax rate when you retire is going to be lower than it is right now. And that's a really bad assumption for many, many people. You've got to set the boundaries. And by setting boundaries, you're going to get the respect of your clients. Stress is very expensive, not only financially, but physically. I don't want my children to hate their job. My dad kind of hated his job. The journey is the destination. Enjoy that ride. That's going to give you a lot more happiness.
Welcome to the Minds Unleashed show with your host, Eric. Join him on the journey where we explore transformative ideas, confront challenges, and discover new perspectives. Together, let's elevate the mindset and transform your personal and business success. So whether you're seeking motivation, practical advice, or a fresh perspective, you've come to the right place. Join Eric on the Minds Unleashed show, and let's dive in together to empower your mind and unleash freedom.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Minds Unleashed show. Join me on this pursuit to see what it takes to empower your mind and unleash freedom. If you get value out of this, please don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, and leave us a review. Let's get into today's show. I'm so grateful to introduce you to today's guest, Chris Picciurro. Chris is the founder of Integrated CPE Group, Teaching Tax Flow, and MRRI. Chris focuses on tax planning and strategy for real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and building a community dedicated to helping tax professionals grow their own practice. Chris has an MBA, CPA, PFS, ARA, and has been an adjunct professor for 2 universities. Please note that the thoughts and opinions of Chris are not tax or financial advice for you listening at home. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Well, Eric, it's a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate this opportunity. I truly enjoy having conversations like this, and we have been co-host of a podcast for a couple of years, so it's always fun to be a guest. And I tell my wife sometimes, she's a special education teacher, and when our children were a little younger, she took on a teaching assistant role. So she was not even though she was credentialed to be a teacher, she wasn't the teacher. And I said, you know what? Sometimes it's better to be Robin than Batman. And then she ended up agreeing sometimes. So it feels good to be Robin today. It's awesome. I'm excited.
Perfect. Thank you so much for being here. And let's jump right into it. So the first thing I noticed when I was, going through your profile and learning more about you is that the first thing people see to describe you is that you're a husband, a father, brother, son, uncle, friend, and business owner. Which role is the hardest for you to fulfill and why?
Oh my goodness, that's a great question. I would say the hardest to fulfill is a father. Definitely. I think there's, a lot of our roles, and maybe second, a pickleballer, because it's difficult. Once you start getting pretty good, you realize how many better players there are. So, but I would say definitely a father. There's a lot that goes into it. You've got, to me, we have a 15-year-old, a 14-year-old, and then my youngest is going to be 11 here in the near future. And just like many things, they don't come with instruction manuals. Now, as a guy, and I don't know how you are, I typically don't read the instruction manual anyway. Even when I was a kid, I'd get a new video game. I'm dating myself. Eric, I'm a lot older than you, but I would get my new Legend of Zelda, Super Mario Brothers. I'd rip it open. And I'm like, I'll figure out what I have to push to jump and to go fast on my controller as I go. But the kids, they don't come with they don't come with an instruction manual. So it is very challenging, and it's a fine line between being a disciplinarian, being a leader of them, being a role model, making decisions that are unselfish, not only with your finances, but with your time, but also really showing them, and guiding them how to prioritize your life. So for our family, even in our refrigerator, I made a little sticky note, and it's faith, family, work, or school, then leisure. And now that you should have all 4 in your life, but there's no doubt about it. Those are our 4 priorities in that order. So, that's a challenge. And I think for anyone that has children, or even thinking about having children, or even if you don't have children, understand that children are always watching you, and they're always absorbing you, and And especially when they're super young, they don't have a network of friends. They don't, let's say they're 2, 3, 4 years old. They really don't they might go to a daycare, but they don't have a school with hundreds of kids in it. So their network of people they know is very, very small. So that they're watching you. And I didn't do the best job of balancing my work and family time when my older 2 kids were young, the first 5 years of their lives. And that really led me to make some major pivots in my career and led me to fail forward a lot, pay a lot of tuition. I call tuition being, just tuition money you've paid to learn lessons in business and in life. And I paid a lot of tuition in growing my business and trying to balance that with, fortunately for me, I'm very blessed that have met an amazing wife, and she doesn't listen to my podcast. I don't know if she'll listen to this one, so I'll brag on her a little bit. But my podcast is about tax planning and strategy. It's not as exciting and as deep and as enriching as this, maybe from a mental standpoint, or it's more niched down. So, but having the right partner in life is huge. And that could be in business, it could be in a friendship, it could be in a marital relationship, or just a non-marital romantic relationship. So having that is important. But long answer to your question is definitely being a father. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that is, something that is very challenging, because having kids is, like you said, it doesn't have an instruction manual. And so even if I read the instruction manual, sometimes I'm confused, right? So, it's definitely, a very challenging role to take on, especially without any guidance. I'd love to jump into kind of growing up. You mentioned that you were, a paper boy at a very young age. What kind of drew you to getting a job at such a young age?
Well, my parents were very hard workers. I grew up in metropolitan Detroit, so in Mount Clemens, Michigan, that became Clinton Township, Michigan. So we grew up, about 9 miles north of Detroit, northeast, and just growing up in a very working class area. It was, hard work was really something that I wanted to model. It also helped that I liked to earn money. I was very entrepreneurial. I loved collecting baseball cards. And so I had to feed my habit of collecting baseball cards and just being a pretty active person. So yeah, when I was my first real job, I think I was 13 or 14. Back in, and it sounds like I'm just going to continuously date myself here, but I'm 49 right now. So, back in those days that you had in the Detroit area, and you had 2 newspapers. You had the Free Press, which would come out in the morning. And then you had the Detroit News, which was your afternoon paper. So if you're listening to this and realizing, what is this guy talking about? Guess what? You didn't know the score of a baseball game if it happened in California in the morning paper. And there was no internet. There was no ESPN. There were no cell phones. You had to actually wait till the paper came or watch the news. So it's a pretty different concept. So the paper boy in our neighborhood and in all the neighborhoods in Detroit was actually a very prestigious position. You wanted to be the paper boy or paper girl. Typically it was a boy. There were paper girls out there as well. And back in those days, you would, it actually taught me a lot of entrepreneurial and life lessons. So you would have a route and you had to run the route like your business. So I had to actually buy the papers wholesale from the Detroit News. They would invoice me based on how many subscribers I had. They would drop the papers off at about 1 p.m. At my parents' house. And I had to go in. I could still remember how they were wrapped in those hard plastics, just how they're all strapped, those straps, and I had to cut them open. And then I would have to put them in my bike. Now you got to remember, Detroit, Michigan, half the year it's pretty cold. So sometimes I'd have my bike. Sometimes I was kind of trying to ride my bike on the ice. Now, if we got a ton of ice and snow, at times my mom would put me in her minivan and slowly drive down the street while I was running to the minivan, grabbing my papers, and I'd have to deliver them to everyone's houses, and every customer was different. So some of them liked their paper, by their mailbox. Most of them liked them right at their doorstep. So I had to learn where they liked the paper. So there was that delivery of the product from a wholesale to retail. Also, if the Detroit News put in what we called stuffers, let's say, one other thing, Eric, I forgot to mention, just think about this. The only way you had a TV guide was to buy the Friday paper, because it was put in the Friday paper. There was no like, you didn't turn your TV on, you could see what was on. You had to have a paper TV guide and like, oh my gosh, to figure out what was on. And the worst was when something changed. Like at that time, I loved WWF, like Hulk Hogan, Macho Man, that, the heyday in the late 80s, early 90s. And once a month on Saturday night, they would have main event instead of Saturday Night Live. And there's sometimes when there's a misprint in the TV guide, people would go crazy, like, what the heck? This is supposed to be on and it's not. But anyway, back to the business part of it. So the stuffers, sometimes there'd be advertisements. So that might be a real estate company or a grocery store. You'd have to take their little piece of paper and stuff it in the paper. You got paid 1 penny per stuff. So if I had 50 people on my route and there's a stuffer, I get 50 extra cents. Now, again, with inflation, that was like my little 10-year-old says, Dad, that was still a lot of money back in the day. I'm like, yes, it was. It was a decent amount of money. So then I'd have to deliver the papers. So I had that part of it, right? When new customers subscribed, I have to go introduce myself. Here's the other, just think about this one, Eric. Collecting money, there were no credit cards. I would have to go to the people's houses, knock on their doors, and collect the money from them, the retail. And so it was like, I think it was like $1.35 a week. So $1.35 or $1.65 for the paper. And I was always hoping they'd round up to $2 and get me a tip. So you're always hoping, tips is where you made your money. You didn't make much money delivering the papers. And then you had some people that were Sunday only or weekend only because they wanted all. Why would they want the Sunday paper? Because that's where all the coupons were on the weekend, Fridays and Sundays. Because back in the day, again, the only way you can actually get a discount on something, you didn't have a Kroger Rewards Club that just, you put your number in and bam, all of the discounts come. You have to have an actual coupon, right? And so anyway, it was just a really great experience for me having to interact with different people. And then on the flip side, and I feel like my parents were pretty strict growing up but were very fair. We're pretty strict. I was thinking, man, I'm kind of surprised they let me at age 13, 14, basically go up to strangers' houses, knock on their doors. Sometimes they'd invite me in their house and try to collect cash from them. And then I'd have to reconcile, like some people like to pay monthly and, So anyway, long story short, I'm probably going to give you a lot of long stories today, but I think for people listening to this podcast, you have to understand that those first jobs are very formative in people's lives. And I was able to really grow my entrepreneurial spirit because I thought, okay, if I'm going to get paid the same if my route takes me an hour and a half, or if I could be efficient and it takes me 45 minutes, or if I hustle, if I deliver what they want, where they want it, and once I got to know your client, I say clients now because I'm in a client-facing business, my customers, how many of them, I always went and collected on Fridays because we're talking a very working class neighborhood just outside of Detroit. That's when everyone got paid. If I go collect on a Tuesday, believe it or not, someone might not have enough money to pay for their newspaper. So I would go back Friday when I got paid, and that would get me the best tips. Then I knew there were some larger Italian families. We had a lot of Italian American families in this area that would get together for dinner every Sunday. So I knew they were going to be home, and that's when I would go, collect so yeah, there are a lot of great stories and lessons I learned from the Detroit News Paperboy years.
Yes, it sounds like it. And even too, like the thought of knocking on someone's door today, collecting money, no credit card, like part of me can't even fathom like that process, let alone doing it. Back then it seems like it was a lot more acceptable. Today, I don't think most people probably wouldn't even answer their door if you knocked on it. And then trying to collect money from them, most people don't even carry cash today. So that's a big one.
Well, I just had this thought. Really, your cell phone replaced your doorknob. I mean, if you think about it, right? Because when I was younger, now or think about when for people that are my age, you might have had a home phone, but you wouldn't be able to call your friends like during dinner time or if you wanted to play with someone. or hang out, you would just basically go to their door and knock on the door. Say, hey, can Johnny play? And then Johnny's mom or dad would wrestle him down and they'd probably shoo him out of the house. That's how you communicated with people. And and even to what you're saying, like directions, there's no MapQuest. Like there was no, or Google Maps or Waze, you know what I mean? You had to like know where you're going, or you would stop at places and ask for directions and landmarks. So yeah, it really was interesting. And it was kind of, dangerous. Like my parents, not dangerous, but my parents didn't drink alcohol in the house. They would be out if we had a family gathering, but they didn't drink any alcohol in the house. So as a younger person, I had no concept if someone like answered the door when I was collecting and then was intoxicated. But I just knew like they kind of like smelled funny, and but they gave me like big tips. So I was like, oh, cool. Okay. I'm going to go to this house at 7 p.m. on a Friday. I know there, and then some of those bigger Italian gatherings, I knew Sunday at like 6 p.m. after dinner, after they've maybe had some glasses of wine, that's when I'm going to go collect. And it just didn't trigger to me that I just knew that it was a good time to collect money. And then my parents were like, yeah, I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And they weren't like belligerent or they're more happy to see you, like, oh, Bambino, come on in. And that, so anyway, a lot of fun memories doing that. But it was, it was also challenging because if you had gone, like we didn't go on tons and tons of vacations. We got, we went up north in northern Michigan quite a bit, but extended vacations. So when you have a paper route, it's really hard to leave. Like because someone's got to do the route for you. It doesn't do itself.
And I think you touched on something good too, is that first job, like kind of setting up your foundation, right? You learned, a lot of skills from sales, marketing, customer service, product, wholesaling. And I kind of reflected back on like my own first job. I worked at a fast food chain. I worked at a grocery store, and, you had to deal with, customer service at 16, 17, 18 years old. And that teaches you a lot of kind of skills that kind of set you up for where you're at today. So I think getting a job at a young age helped to build your foundation for kind of where you're at today.
I would agree 100%. And sometimes there was like a local paper called the Macomb Daily, which is in the county we grew up in, Macomb County. And the Paperboy from Macomb Daily was a friend of mine. So yeah, so sometimes like if he went out of town, I would cover his Macomb Daily route, and then he'd cover mine. But again, once you do the route for like a few weeks, I knew exactly what houses to go to. But when you start, the first day took hours and hours just to figure out who gets a paper and who does not get a paper. Most houses got papers at that time because, again, that there was, other than the news, that was their way to connect to the world. I still love newspapers though. There's nothing like cracking a newspaper open and having a big bowl of cereal in a weekend morning. But although I don't get the paper here, the only time I really read the paper is like if I'm traveling and there's like a USA Today at the hotel I'm at, and I'm like, oh, a newspaper. That's pretty cool.
That's probably the difference between people in our age versus like your age is people at my age or even younger, they probably would never pick up a newspaper. Probably don't even know how to like find certain things in the newspaper. We'll just go to like Google News or Apple News, and it's right there at our fingertips in our phone.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree 100%.
I love to kind of touch now on from, you did the Paperboy job, and now, you go to college, you're now kind of getting that first job as a CPA. Can you kind of talk through why did you even want to be a CPA?
Right now, not too many little boys and girls grow up in their front yard throwing the baseball or football with their parents saying, man, I want to be an accountant one day. I wanted to be on the Detroit Tigers. That would have been my preferable route. But didn't quite have the skills to do that. That's for sure. But yeah, I was always good with numbers. So I would, even my cousins, my older cousins poured into me quite a bit when I was younger. I'm talking like 6, 7, 8 years old. And my godparents' sons were the ones that really spent a lot of time with me. And I started playing Monopoly at that time. And I was a banker at like age 6. And I just loved the numbers. I loved that concept of economics and that sort of stuff. So I always knew I wanted to do something with numbers. At one point, I thought when I was in high school, I was going to be a sports statistician. Now that there are a lot of sports statisticians, but at that time, not many games, ESPN was not even born yet. So there weren't a ton of games on. So I was thinking, is that really a viable career? Although it is. And I took in high school accounting my junior year, and I took economics and any business electives. And then one of my friend's dads, who's a CPA, offered to teach an advanced placement accounting course for our high school. So my senior year would have to go into school before school started to take this AP accounting course, which was good because then we had more time in the afternoon. And it's at that point I said, wow, this is really interesting, because I really was pretty good at algebra, but once I got into like trigonometry, calculus and stuff, I really thought algebra and accounting are very similar. And at that point, it's because he was like the CFO of a big company, and I'm like, oh, accounting isn't just like sitting in books. It's understanding the numbers, but also communicating with other people and helping other people. So in high school, that's when I realized I wanted to go into accounting, and then ended up graduating from Michigan State, who's one of the top accounting programs. They have a lot of CPAs there. And I thought, okay, well, even no matter where I go in accounting, or even if I move over to finance, because I thought about going into finance as well, at least while I'm in that mode of being, learning, why don't I knock out my CPA license right away? So I figured no matter what happens, having a CPA license is only going to be a positive. And I did a lot of weird, crazy jobs through the time when I retired from being a paperboy. I didn't quite have a ceremony or anything, but worked in all these kind of crazy jobs. And then once I got to Michigan State, I did a couple internships and then realized, yeah, I want to be a CPA. So I got rolling with that, and then started working at a smaller CPA firm, and really seeing how the CPAs that own the firm, really how important they were to their clients, how vital they were in their financial decisions, and their, in how much they, they're kind of a half psychologist and that sort of stuff. So for me, that's what really got me going in high school, and then at Michigan State, thinking, okay, I really want to be a CPA. I feel like I have a little bit of an edge on on many other people that are going into accounting, because I have that. I'm really an entrepreneur more than an accountant, and I know that will serve me better in the future. So yeah, that's what got me going in it, and just being really important, feeling good about the work you're doing, feeling that you're making a difference for the people you're interacting with and working with. That's the payoff. Obviously there's compensation involved, but that's what makes you feel good.
Right. And I know that you've mentioned Monopoly on a couple other podcasts that you've been on. So what's the winning strategy for Monopoly, so I know how to beat everybody?
Well, not many people will play with me anymore because I'm a little vicious. I might be maybe I'm a nice guy in real life, but Monopoly, I could be vicious. The strategy is going to be buy as many properties as you can and get around everyone plays their own rules. Some people play that you've got to, get around the board before you can buy a property, or everyone has different strategies, but yeah, buy as many properties as you can quickly. Try to get the railroads early, because once you get into the game where everyone's got hotels, landing on a railroad is not a big deal. But if you can get the railroads early, that could be really costly for people. The red and the yellow, those are the best colors, because I don't know if any of my family listens to this, then they're going to know some of my secrets. But when you go around past Kentucky, Indiana, and then the yellows are Atlantic, Marvin Gardens, and Ventnor. I don't know why. It's just sad that I know these things. Then there's that, you land in that spot where you go to jail, right? But if you go to jail, where are you going? Right back to the row before you get to the Kentuckys, Illinois, and Indiana, the 3 red and the yellows. So that row there is like moderate, the higher priced, but not the super expensive like Boardwalk and Park Place. So you can get your houses up quick, and don't trade right away. Try to trade if you're going to trade, so you can find the weakest player, based on what they have. Not that they're a bad player, but with the least amount of assets, and try to trade them an asset. Like I would trade you Boardwalk for a red, because I know you might not have a lot of money, and it's really expensive to build on Boardwalk. Where on the reds, I've got 3 reds and I could build quickly. So yeah, those are some of the strategies.
Perfect. Now I'll have to try to implement those and try to convince my friends to go play Monopoly. See how I do.
Well, I tell you, it's fun playing on like Monopoly Go or on an app now, because the pain of Monopoly is doling out all those darn dollars and the 5s, the 1s, so yeah, I like playing. I'm kind of got hooked on. We were playing with the kids on a PlayStation, and it just makes it easier. So
yeah, no, I definitely agree there. Making it a lot less painful on all the stuff you gotta put out, and just want to focus on playing the game.
Yes.
Awesome. So I know that you worked at your CPA firm. Learned kind of the fundamentals and basics, and then can you kind of take us up to where you're at today here within the tax and real estate space?
Absolutely. It has been a journey. I've been a CPA for almost 25 years. Yeah, just adding them up. Not good with numbers. No, about 25 years, 1999. I've had a lot of experiences both in private industry and public accounting. I've been in practice on my own for 22 years. And when I say I'm in practice on my own, that doesn't mean that I'm Han Solo out here and just have Chewbacca with me. I'm part of a team, but meaning that have developed my own tax practice. And as I said before, when I first started, I was more of a general practitioner, and I realized in our space, the more specialized and niched down you can be, the more valuable you can be. Because what we have is, time. Time is our most valuable resource. If I can niche down, then I can duplicate my efforts and my strategies quicker. So that's one of the things. But now, right where I'm at right now is I spend 80% of my time on tax planning and strategy. And I work with people in our private CPA practice, which are primarily real estate investors. That's one segment. I also work with other typically high income or high net worth earners or people that are in a higher marginal tax rate on coaching and tax planning and strategy. So let's say it's someone that, real life example, I have there's someone that I got referred to by another tax professional, and the person had an income of about $200,000 per year, which is a really good income, but he shot up to $900,000, and he's like, "Wow, I've got $400,000 sitting in my bank account. I've never had this much money. I don't know what to do. I don't necessarily need it to use and spend it myself. I'd like to put it somewhere that's tax efficient." So that's where I'll come in and really run what's called a personalized tax plan. So the second segment are going to be collaborating with other accountants that have clients that maybe got to a point where they want to bring in an expert to do the tax planning and strategy. Or they're people in our teaching tax flow community. So they're people that are, there's a value of doing some planning and strategy. So those are pretty much the segments that I'm working with on that. Through really focusing over the last 10 years on the tax planning and strategy piece, within our private CPA practice, we've developed some systems and processes that really, really work. And so over that course of time, I'm like, gosh, this really works. It's getting a great result. People understand what I'm doing. But what do I call it? Because it's an intangible. Like tax planning and strategy. Like you can't put your finger on it. So through that, I said, okay, well, we got to get some IP, and I've got to get what we're doing named something. And that's where teaching tax flow was born, because a lot of people understand cash flow, especially real estate investors and entrepreneurs, or just people. You could work that have a W-2 job and maybe pay rent or have a mortgage. Tax flow is different. Tax flow is the that's the tax benefit or burden of any of your financial decisions. So, okay, that's tax flow. So teaching tax flow is educating people using our proprietary process of how to go from where you're at to really tax efficient, legally and ethically reduce the tax you pay in your lifetime. So that's what I'm doing now. And like I said, primarily for our private CPA practice, also working with one-off taxpayers through our teaching tax flow community. And thirdly, working with and collaborating with other tax professionals that really focus on the tax preparation part of things, but really don't work on the tax planning and strategy. And that's about 75-80% of what I'm doing. And then about 20% of what I'm doing is really coaching other tax professionals on how to run their practices more efficiently and profitably.
That's beautifully put. I think the one thing that I want to kind of touch on is, obviously your niche is real estate investors, high income net worth individuals, but what about those people in, the Detroit neighborhood, the middle class people? Like, what's some high level general kind of advice people can do to like reduce their taxes? Like, to my knowledge, I'm aware of like you can increase like your 401k contribution or your HSA contribution. But outside of increasing my contributions, like, is there any other things at a kind of a high level?
Well, Eric, no, this is an amazing question. And now I'm going to get on my soapbox a little bit, because I firmly believe that everyone can benefit from tax planning and strategy. And I just told another CPA the other day, I said, we were just talking. I'm like, you know what? Someone that makes $50,000 a year gets more benefit out of maybe what we are teaching than someone that's making $500,000 a year. Because for someone that makes $50,000 a year, if we can help them grow hundreds of thousands of dollars of tax-free assets for when they're older, that's going to be a life changer for them. So that's the beautiful thing about teaching tax flow. And that's why I wanted to create something that anyone can use. I believe anyone in any marginal tax rate can benefit from tax planning and strategy. So I would say if you're someone, so we have a process where it's a 4-step process in teaching tax flow where we diagnose someone's situation using their marginal tax rate. We use color-coded diagnoses based on your marginal tax rate. So someone that's in a lower marginal tax rate would be a green diagnosis. They don't really need a tax deduction. They're in a super low tax rate. Then we diagnose and we prescribe different strategies. I'll touch on some of those in a minute. Then we do something called an IQ test. IQ test is another proprietary. We have some IP on it where we identify a strategy, quantify the result, meaning you might have someone that's, hey, I want to max out my retirement plan. Okay, that's a really admirable thing to think about and want to do. Well, the max you can put in your 401k is $20,000 a year. Well, that's 40% of my income. I can't do that. Okay, then that's okay. So we can't max that retirement plan, but let's look at different strategies to minimize the tax on your contributions over the long run. And then we implement. Implementation is key. So we want people and we want to empower people, and that's why we're building the teaching tax flow community, to have access to implementation partners that typically people with, $350,000 or more of income or $1 million more of assets have. So we're bringing those implementation partners in to that community. So to answer your question on someone that's maybe just getting started or there is an income range of, let's say, $50,000 to $60,000, I think retirement plan contributions are really, really important. But my best advice would be most likely contribute to your Roth account and not your traditional retirement account. Because in a traditional retirement account, or let's say a traditional IRA or a 401k, you're getting a deduction off your tax bill the year you contribute money, but it's going to grow tax deferred, and eventually you're going to pay tax on that at whatever the tax rate is when you're retired. And we think tax rates are going to go up. Where the Roth, you don't get a deduction today, but it grows tax free. So let's say someone's 25 years old, okay, just whatever. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the rule of 72, but the rule of 72 means that you take your average rate of return, you divide 72 by that number, and that's how long it takes for something to double. So let's be conservative and call it an 8% rate of return over the course of someone's career. They're 25 years old. That every dollar they put into their retirement account today is going to double in 9 years. It should double 4 times 36 years when they even start taking it out. And that's only at age 61, right? So by the time they're 70, when they have to, typically are going to be fully retired, it could double 5 times. So for someone in this income bracket, let's say they put $1,000 into their 401k or traditional IRA, it's only going to benefit them maybe $100 today. But if they do the Roth and it doubles 5 times, so let's see, 2004, 8, 16, $32,000 tax-free when retirement. So let's say they do $5,000, that's $150,000. So my point is, if you're not in a high marginal tax bracket right now, I would seriously consider contributing to a Roth retirement account instead of a traditional. That'd be one of my hacks. If you're in interest rates are kind of high right now, but there are a lot of tax benefits of buying a primary home. So that's something to deeply consider as well. And then also, really, when you're younger, especially if you start having a family, you really want to look at making sure that if something were to happen to you, if you got disabled or deceased earlier than expected, that your family's taken care of. So there's some advanced whole life insurance strategies. Again, like we said in the beginning, this is not tax advice, financial advice. You want to work with someone, but in general, that's the beauty of teaching tax flow. Diagnose, prescribe. The prescriptions for what we would call a green diagnosis, which would be someone that is in a lower marginal tax rate, or in gold, tax-free income and growth, would be Roth contributions and maybe some advanced whole life insurance planning and maybe home ownership.
That's a lot of good information right there. I think that is something I learned today, because I think the general personal finance advice I always see is like, oh, max out your 401k, max out your HSA, max out your Roth, which are all great strategies and advice. But, you know, a normal person, my parents, sister, friends and family may not know some of those like tax implications that might actually have, huge effects on kind of like when you go to retire, you're like, oh shit, I got all these taxes I got to pay. Like, my money's not as high as what I thought it was. So that's definitely something that I think people should consider and something that I learned today.
Well, Eric, you nailed it. So the assumption by way too many people is that your tax rate when you retire is going to be lower than it is right now. And that's a really bad assumption for many, many people, because not only, do we think tax rates are going to go up in the future? Think about when you're retired, you don't have children as deductions. Hopefully you don't. They're not living in your basement playing video games still. You don't have, maybe you most likely probably paid your mortgage off, right? So you don't have a lot of deductions to offset that income in your retirement age. Also, your Social Security. When you start drawing Social Security, the taxable portion of your Social Security, the maximum taxable portion of your Social Security is 85%. The higher your income, the higher percentage of your Social Security is taxed. So people come to me and say, hey, I'm in the 12% tax bracket. Yes, you are. One of the things we teach about teaching tax flow is your marginal tax rate is much more important than your tax bracket. Your marginal tax rate means for every extra dollar of income you earn and pay tax on, how much goes to your involuntary business partner, which is the government, and how much do you get to keep. So someone that's drawing Social Security that has to take money out of their retirement account, there's something called the required minimum distribution when you get to in your 70s, could trigger a double tax, because now you're triggering a tax on your Social Security and you're still paying tax on the IRA distribution. So I like that, I'd really focus on the Roth in the younger years. Also, I agree on the HSA. Maybe I probably should have mentioned that. I mean, anytime that if you're going to be able to put money into something that you're like a health savings account and get a tax deduction for, I would at least put the amount in that your annual deductible is. Because if your deductible is $1,000 a year, $2,000 a year, you're going to pay that anyway. So why don't do it with pre-tax dollars, not after tax?
Totally agree. And some companies even now actually contribute money to that account, and you don't even have to put in $1. So that's, kind of like a double win.
Yes, I'd say for sure. If you're starting off with a job and your employer matches your retirement contribution, at least put the minimum amount in to trigger that match. I mean, that's free money, and it'd be silly not to.
Awesome. One thing I'd like to kind of touch on is like, some of my own personal experiences. I worked for a consulting firm, and taxes, CPA life was always very rough. And one story that stood out to me that you mentioned is you were in the hospital during the delivery of one of your kids, and you were doing 23 tax returns. Can you kind of take us back to that moment and tell us about that? But then also, like, how did you realize that was something that you probably had to change?
I had a few aha moments in my career, and that was definitely one of them. March 19th, 2010. That's when my daughter was born, and we have one daughter and two sons. Back to that fatherhood, being a father is the hardest job. In my mind, I was thinking my job is to provide for my family at all costs. Doesn't matter, and so I also mentioned that the first 10 years of my having a CPA practice, my practice ran me. I didn't run it. My workflow controlled my entire life. And it was profitable, but it was almost like I didn't even realize it was happening. I didn't think it was abnormal to barely make it to your own kids' birthdays and that sort of stuff. So at that, one of my big aha moments, because I started the practice in 2002, so 8 years into it, March, middle of March, peak time for tax preparation. My wife is going to, we had to schedule all of the children's deliveries on Fridays because this is how sad this was, because I had a little more freedom with appointments, on Fridays. So we schedule the delivery, we go in, and while I'm there, I brought my little laptop, I knocked out over 20 tax returns. And when my wife Now, this was our second child. The first child, you're like, a little different. But and she's like, all right, we were chatting, and she's like, all right, dilation was at a point where we're ready to have this baby, and she's ready to have the baby. I'm ready to hold her hand and not pass out, and be supportive. I'm like, all right, I put my computer away. Boom, we had the baby. Once everyone was resting, I cracked my computer back open and started banging out more tax returns. So but then I reflected on it and said, what in the world is going on? Where are my priorities right now? And realized that they were flawed. Now I had inadvertently created a practice. It's not like I could just walk away from it. And that's where I started a transition away from this big turn and burn tax practice to niching and to moving into what's called a subscription model and focusing on tax planning and strategy and some of those higher value activities. And yeah, it was just one of those things. I think sometimes we all hit that aha moment. And it wasn't like, thank goodness it wasn't that I was at happy hour and realized like, hey, I come to the bar every day for 4 hours and I got to stop. I was working too much. There's a lot worse things you could be doing than working too much, but it got to be an unhealthy amount. And that was one of those aha moments where I'm like, in the moment, I was like, man, I'm pretty dang efficient. I knocked out 20 tax returns and we still had a baby. And then a little while later, I'm like, that's really sad. That is really unhealthy. And by the grace of God, I kind of, realized, okay, I'm still young enough to pivot. I'm still young enough to change directions. And honestly, that's one of the reasons I wanted to create Teaching Tax Flow, because in my heart, I still want to help thousands and thousands of people. I just can't meet with thousands and thousands of people. So we're going to create enough content, enough opportunities for those people to still get the advice and the direction they need.
Yeah, that's a great reflection, of that. And I think, in today's world, like, I'm a millennial, but millennial Gen Zs have really pushed that work-life balance, to be what exactly that is. And I think that's something you've kind of mentioned. So like what did that reflection look like for you when you were like, oh, I was super efficient doing all these tax returns, but then you were like, wait a second, I just did that, in the hospital. Like what, can you kind of talk me through that?
Right. Yeah. It didn't happen right away, but it started to eat at me that I was missing out on, all the things that are important. And for me, I love kids. I'm just not the best with babies and toddlers. I struggle with them, because I can't like throw a ball with them and they can't tell me what's wrong or if they're hungry or if they like something or not. And, they don't necessarily listen to your discipline. So but once they started, I'd say my oldest is only 14 months older than the daughter that had my one aha moment. And then it just ate at me a little bit. And then I just remember thinking, like, I literally, my wife would say, like my son's second birthday party, hey, be here at this time. I had no clue who was going. I would just show up and it was his birthday. And I was thinking the whole time, oh gosh, I got to get this stuff done. I got to get these tasks done. So what it made me feel like, it made me feel very shamed, really. And just like my priorities got out of whack. And then although my heart was in the right place. Like I'm their father. At that time, my wife was a homemaker. She's a teacher, but she was at home with 2 babies. And I'm like, I felt like I had to hit a 5-run home run every day, even though the most you could do is hit a grand slam and 4 runs in, right? So I'm like, dang it. I need to work more efficiently. And ultimately, I'm stealing from them. I'm stealing these days and this time. Now, it doesn't mean that I can sit around and every day with the kids and never go to work. I still have to work hard, but I have to work more efficiently. And that was one of those. That's just ate at me. So that was one of the reflections. Another one that was similar right after this. I'll never forget this. It was Easter Day, and we were still. So little background. My wife and I moved from the Detroit area to Franklin, Tennessee, which is 15 miles south of Nashville, 8 years ago. And part of the reason we were able to move, it was because we were able to recraft how the business was structured to a virtual and niche down. But at the time, I was up in Michigan at home, Easter Day, trying to knock out tax returns. And I remember going to church, having And then afterward, my family left. I was at home by myself working my butt off on Easter. And I remember calling clients because we were missing like little pieces of information to finish up their tax return, and feeling, Eric, that feeling was so uncomfortable. And the people, they appreciated that I was busting my butt. Like, I'm thinking from their perspective, like, God, this guy's really busted his butt, because Easter is usually right in the beginning of April, so we're right at that time frame of. But the government wants you to think their tax deadline is. You can get a 6-month extension, right? That it's no big deal. But I didn't have that through my thick head at the time, and yeah, so I would say the feelings were shame, embarrassment. Again, it wasn't like I was on the streets. We had a safe, nice home. We were doing fine, but inside, I just was like, this isn't this isn't who I want to be. Like I said, that little sticker that's in my refrigerator right now, number 3, work, became number 1, and that's not healthy. It's got to be up there, right? It's got to be in the mix. But so yeah, at that point, luckily, I started the practice when I was 27. So it wasn't like I started this business when I was 45, and 8 years in, I was in my mid 50s or early 50s, and it was too hard to repivot.
Yeah, no, I think that's good that you have those reflections. And, if I was, your client, you're calling me on Easter, I'd be like, oh man, why is he calling me on Easter? But in reality, you're like, okay, he's, working, he's, it's that busy season. But, I think sometimes you just got to be like, all right, this might be too much. So it sounds like that, physically your heart was in the right place, like trying to be there for your kids. But then like mentally you realize that like, okay, I need to pivot the business so that I can physically, mentally be there for them. And I think that that's like really important, and I think today, I can see that with your subscription model that you've mentioned. So, for this price, you get this delivery, how long it takes. So yeah, you touched on moving to Tennessee. So I guess like why did you move to Tennessee? What kind of drove that?
So yeah, great question. And I'm going to backtrack one little second. And that's why I'm very passionate about helping other tax professionals. I see this burnout. I see it every day, and I'm like, we all are, especially in our business, your business is going to run exactly how you engineered it. And ultimately it's our responsibility. So if we're not happy that people are calling our cell phone at 10 at night, then you probably shouldn't have given out your personal cell phone. That's your fault. You've got to set the boundaries. And by setting boundaries, you're going to get the respect of your clients. And one of the things I teach other accountants and even other people, just business owners, is that boundaries equal freedom. Like people that are entrepreneurs, they don't want to have. They think boundaries are bad. But for me, in time blocking, like I time block all my communications. In the morning, I go through all my emails, make sure I have a clean email box. And before, at the end of the day, workday, I do the same thing. But I don't have my emails popped open every moment and all the dings and pings of whatever, if you're using Teams or Slack or whatever, be focused. So anyway, tangent, but hey, what the heck? So yeah, it was I had always, wanted to move somewhere south, back from when I was out in high school, and a lot of family in the Detroit area. Still have love for a lot of the people in Michigan, and especially my Michigan State Spartans and Detroit Tigers, which is another side note. But my wife and I really reflected and prayed, and we're like, I'm concerned about our kids growing up and what job opportunities are going to be available in the Detroit area, especially at that time. Our children were born in 2009, 2010. So I know you're a younger guy, but this was when the recession occurred. You got to figure the city of Detroit used to be one of the biggest cities in the country. The population declined significantly over the last 40 years. The city itself went bankrupt. The biggest corporation in the world at the time, General Motors, went bankrupt. Right? And where's it based? Right in Detroit. So all of this is happening economically. And I'm like, I just think it's time that we consider moving somewhere else. That being said, it was like, okay, it's not going to be easy to move unless I change my business model. So finally got to a point where I knew we could move. And about 10 years ago, we thought, okay, if I had to do it all over again, if I could start from scratch, where would we want to live? Because we'd like to travel, but we also have to understand that the grass isn't always greener on the other side of the fence. When you go somewhere for vacation, it's not like that when you need to, get to school, get to work, go to the doctors, get to baseball practice, and et cetera, et cetera. And so like any good accountant, I'm like, okay, I'm going to create a spreadsheet and I'm going to lay out every place that we could potentially move our family, because what we want to do is we wanted to find the best place in the United States for what we're looking for to raise our children, but also find the place that we could see ourselves for the rest of our life. Doesn't mean we're not going to maybe snowbird somewhere warmer or travel, but this is where we want our roots to go deep into somewhere. And there are a lot of great options. Also with my parents in Michigan, my wife's parents in Texas, somewhere in between that could be potentially drivable within a 12-hour drive to each. That way, if God forbid something happens and I need to get up there or vice versa, that can happen within if I get a call at 3 a.m. and I can't get on an airplane, but my parents need me, I could be there by, within 8-9 hours. Probably be driving a little fast if that happened. Thank God that has not happened yet. So those are all the considerations. And once we created the spreadsheet, I wanted better weather, I wanted no state income tax. And especially, with the Detroit area, again, that population has declined and just kind of the economy has declined over the last 40 years. I was looking, we both were, my wife and I, looking for somewhere that was in a growth mode, but had a lot of culture that, a city maybe didn't need to be the size of Detroit, but at least large enough that had an NFL team. Because my thought was if a city has got an NFL team, then it's probably a viable area and also somewhere that isn't tied to one specific industry. Now, obviously, Nashville is a music city, but we also have the state capital here. We have a ton of corporations moving here, like Bridgestone and Nissan, and now we've got just a lot of companies move here because of the tax environment. Very pro-business. Also, as a tax preparer, not having to tangle with state income tax is attractive, right? Because you don't. If you go to a tax professional and let's say you live in Philadelphia and you have a city tax and a state tax and a federal tax, it's not like you get your tax return like, man, they did a great job on my city of Philadelphia tax. I really appreciate that. There's no real value add to having those local taxes. So we don't have that here in Tennessee. We do have a franchise and excise tax for businesses, but no personal income tax. And one of the columns was inches of snow per year. So this was less than an inch. We do get a little snow, but we get a lot of the seasons. Well, yeah, those are all the things that went into it. And then we picked a few places out that we visited. And just honestly, I think there's a higher power that just kind of spoke to us when we were here. We fell in love with Nashville. Then we fell in love with Franklin, which is about 15 miles south of Nashville. And then the community that we're in now had already started as a master plan community, but there was a lot there's an elementary school. There is an elementary school that now my wife works at, ironically. I remember driving by the school the first time, like, our kids might go there. They could walk there. I grew up in that environment that I could walk to my elementary school. I could walk to my friends' houses. Now it's a little different. People, like you said, if you knock on someone's door, the first thing is like, do I have a baseball bat or something? Who in the heck's at my door and what are they trying to sell me? But being in that type of environment was attractive to us. So everything came into play. We took a leap of faith and it worked out.
That's beautifully put. And you put a lot of considerations into play, snow being one, weather, of course, if you don't put taxes into consideration, that would obviously be very ironic. It's interesting. You mentioned how you looked at, a variety of places. What other places did you look at? So was like Nevada on there, Wyoming, like what other, Texas might have been up there?
Well, I thought, we thought about, so my wife's family lives in Texas, in Galveston and in Houston area. So the original list was like, think about like if you were like a stud college recruit, you first have a list of 20 and then you narrow it down to 10 and then you narrow it down to 5 for your official visit. So yeah, in the first list, definitely with Texas. But the real deep considerations were the Orlando area. So at that time we had an office in Orlando of our company. Orlando's attractive because it's great weather most of the year. It gets warm in the summer, but I'm good with the heat. I lived in the cold a long time. They don't have an NFL team, but they have a lot going on there. And our kids were so young, we're like, wow, we can get annual passes to Disney and we could do this, we could do that. Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville. So if we were thinking of Florida, we were thinking in that area. We were looking at outside Charlotte, North Carolina. And, we wanted a city that was smaller than Detroit. So we really weren't thinking about like Atlanta or anything like that. Or, then I was like, man, it'd be nice to be by the water too. Which would be good. And had we not moved here, we would have moved to just outside Charleston, South Carolina, a place called Mount Pleasant, which is a really nice area. We just felt like Nashville, the negative of Nashville in our decision-making was it was inland. There are some lakes around here, but you're not like on the beach, but we're only about a 6.5 hour drive from the Gulf of Mexico, which is beautiful. Destin, Panama City Beach, Gulf Shores, Alabama. You can't find nicer beaches, in my opinion, in the United States. So that was kind of the trade-off. And we felt like Nashville is much more metropolitan, where Charleston is really beautiful, but it's a lot of tourism. And it's a lot of people that have lived there for many generations. There weren't a lot of people, kind of commuting and building a new culture, a new environment. And Nashville had more, music and just, we're kind of busier people. We like to be active. There's just always a lot going on here. So never a dull moment. I remember when we were in Michigan, my wife and I would, especially the kids were younger, so we would really try to schedule a date night. And okay, what are we going to do tonight? And it was hard to find like live music, and you can go to a bar, but there wasn't like as much going on there as there is here. So yeah, those I'm trying to think of some of the other places we were thinking about, and I mean, I don't know. For a while, I thought we were going to move outside of Orlando. We also had an office in Charleston at that time too, so that was a factor. I thought like moving to a beach town would be cool, like especially if you're on the maybe 15, 20 miles inland. It could economically could be more affordable. But then I thought, well, living somewhere where everyone else goes on vacation, at some point you've got to go to work, and it's not, do you really want the majority of the people coming through like the grocery store you go to be people that don't live there? I know it might sound like a weird thing to think about, but we really expanded our minds and thought, didn't make a 4-year decision, made a 40-year decision.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting too, because, I've moved out of my hometown, and it was definitely interesting. Like, what were the considerations, and I saw a lot of social media posts that I would say like, oh, if you're thinking about moving, this is your sign to do it. So that's kind of, for anybody listening, if you're thinking about moving, this is your sign to do it. It's funny you mentioned, do you want to live where people vacation? And that's kind of where I live now. And I see them, and you can tell that they're tourists, obviously. And then it just makes me very grateful that like where I live, people spend a lot of time and money to come here, but I get to enjoy it on a daily basis. And so it really makes you figure out what is actually important to you on like where you live, because it is super important, right? Is there date nights? Is there sports teams? Is there activities? Is there things to do? And those are all super important. Is there no state income tax? Top three, requirements. So.
Well, I agree with you. And so part of the things we did too was like look at the like top 10 places to raise your family. And, there's always these lists, but Franklin kept coming up on almost every list. Like, okay. And like you said, even though I said I didn't want to live in a tourist area, it's not that there are a lot. I mean, Nashville gets a lot of visitors, so it's not. And I'm only 15 miles south of Nashville. In Franklin, we get a ton of visitors here. So, I mean, I don't. It's in with Tennessee, our tax structure is really high sales tax. We have a pretty high liquor tax and a pretty high occupancy tax. In our state is at a surplus, right? No state income tax, low real estate taxes. So when I go to downtown Nashville, we try to go like, on Sunday, Monday, or Tuesday. There's always people down there. But if I go there and it's slammed, I'm like, good, come to our state, come to the Smoky Mountains, come to downtown Franklin, and just spend your money, spend your time. The people you're not going to meet the nicer people, in my opinion. Just going around, get this all the time from people visiting, and like you said, it's kind of cool to live somewhere where people are like, we have an actual visitor center, and people like buy T-shirts and bumper stickers that they came here. So that's an honor. So, Yeah, it is neat, and we kind of get that feel. So we ended up, kind of we talk about eating our own cooking. So we've invested in real estate, and one of the properties we bought a beach house in Panama City Beach, Florida, East End, right by it's called St. Andrews State Park. So we're not necessarily where the MTV spring breakers are. It's a really residential area. We rent it out when we're not there, but I go there. That's my corporate retreat. So I go there about 8 to 10 times a year. And now we have a Publix, and we have certain restaurants and watering holes that we know are local. And I get that little bit of that flavor when we're down there because it's our second house. So we rent it out primarily, but we have our stuff there. And I was like, okay, yeah, it is neat to see. It's not terrible when a lot of people go down there because, like you said, you're in a spot that people want to go to. So what was your like clincher of moving out of the hometown for you?
No snow and warm weather. So I was basically looking at Arizona, Texas, Florida. It had to be warm. State income tax was definitely up there for a consideration. So it definitely had to be those. And so yeah, and I'm not going back north anytime soon. So, and I know you mentioned this beach condo. So, and I know that you said you do taxes for real estate investors. So what is it like to be an investor of a beach condo? Do you Airbnb it? Do you do like monthly rentals? What does that kind of look like?
Right. So we've actually used a lot of the tax strategies that we teach and educate people on. And yeah, we bought a 2-bedroom condo quite a few years ago in a more high traffic area. And that had high occupancy, but not a huge rate per night. And that was really easy to own because there's an there's positive and negative, but there was an on-site property management company that took care of everything. Of course, they took a decent chunk of the rent. But with our kids getting older, that was a 2-bedroom condo that we quickly outgrew that and sold that a couple of years ago and did what's called a 1031 exchange, which section 1031 of the tax code, and bought a single family home. Now with the single family home, our occupancy percentage is less than the condo, but the rate per night is much, much higher. So in what I do, my clients are the property manager. So I already know who's going to help manage the property, either if it's a residential property in a different market. We have some properties in Indianapolis or in Florida. So I already know what we call building your board of directors. I already know them. They're my clients and I know how they operate and I trust them. So yeah, so that one's a little more stressful because the highs are a little higher, the lows are a little lower. I kind of don't think about it on a daily basis, and because I've outsourced that stress. We always talk about stress is very expensive. So we have an amazing property management company that honestly I feel like we're partners. They're your partner, and that's how people should, in my opinion, should feel with anyone that they're working with. It could be their attorney, there could be their CPA, it could be their real estate professional. So yeah, it's not too stressful. I mean, I'm not one to necessarily worry. The only thing is in January, there's a big tornado that went through Panama City Beach. And I'm not kidding you. We were 2.5 blocks away from it hitting our house, but that's beyond my control. So if it happened, it would really be disappointing. There's a waffle shop, an omelet shop that takes cash only. And I'll say it now because unfortunately they got wiped out. But I used, as an internal family joke, I used to call it the tax evasion waffle shop. Because every morning my kids are old enough, they'd ride their bikes or walk up there. And a lot of times my wife and I would go for a walk or go play pickleball, and then we'd all meet about 10 in the morning. And unfortunately it got wiped out with this tornado. So it was super close. But I would say if you're someone that really worries about a lot of things or maybe a worrywart, doing a short-term rental property is probably not the best option. Unless you want to self-manage. There are a lot of successful self-managers, and there's a lot of tax advantages as well. So for us, final thing on that, PCB in that area specifically on the east end of the city is a place that we really love. And I look at that investment there is really more personal. It's more heart than head. I mean, yes, it rents out, but it's just having, is a tough one because sometimes we feel like, well, we should go to different places and not be tied to one place and go on a lot more vacations. But on the other side of it, being there, getting there and seeing your stuff in your owner's closet and knowing, like, even going down there, like we all have our favorite restaurants and stuff, like, oh, I can't wait to go to this place and this place. And even playing, not to mention pickleball again, but I've developed friendships with some of the guys that play down there. And now whenever I go to town, we arrange some matches, and we have I don't know, we've established kind of some people that we've befriended down there that we love going down there, and we'll get together for dinner or coffee or a drink. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, you touched on a lot of key things because, I used to listen to a lot of real estate podcasts. I even thought about being a real estate investor, but I know for myself that I don't want to put in all that time for managing the property or dealing with property management. But it sounds like that, for you have a great relationship with property managers and you have one. So that seems to be the make or break in that industry for what helps your deal kind of cash flow, or can also be catastrophic from, a financial perspective. So I think that's definitely a key one for, people that are considering that space from an investment perspective. And then you also made two key points that I want to touch on, which is stress is very expensive. And I think it might be one of the it might be more expensive than your taxes these days. And building a board of directors. Yeah. The building a board of directors is a good one. Can you, do you do that in your professional and also personal life? Cause I think, that's kind of been like a little bit of inspiration for, a podcast, is I got to talk to so many different people and almost build a network of board of directors.
Absolutely. I think you should build a board of directors personally and professionally. In teaching tax flow, we have a whole little course. And our courses tend to be 5 minutes or less. But we teach about who should be on your board of directors. And it doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be paid. It's like, in my mind, I have my board of directors, and that's really, really important, because those are key relationships, and it really shows itself when you don't have one. Like, think about if your car breaks down and you don't have that go-to mechanic, but if you have a board of directors and your buddy is, someone you can say, hey, I need a mechanic, or I need this, or I need that. So even though we're in this digital age that we Google things and search things, a lot of things still come down to personal relationships. Interpersonal relationships are so important. So I would say yes, and understand is when you get started off, either when you get started off in business, or you're working and trying to build your life financially and relationship wise, you're going to wear, like, certain people are going to have multiple spots on the board, and you might wear your own board of director hat. So like someone that starts a business, they're probably going to do their own bookkeeping in the very beginning because they might not have the resources or relationship to hire a bookkeeper, but that's somewhere that you want to get filled. So, and on a personal side, part of the reason, one of the first things we talked about is why I wanted to become a CPA is, in everyone's life, your tax professionals probably or your financial advisor should be on your board of directors, because just like your primary care physician, and just like your insurance professional, and because when, you can go online and get an insurance quote, but what happens when, your fire occurs in your house, or something happens? Is someone going to be there to advocate for you? Someone going to be there to help you out? So I think building your board is very important. And, absolutely. Stress is very expensive, not only financially, but physically. Like you see, if you can be in a situation where you're alleviating stress from someone, that provides value, and that's a good place to be professionally. Conversely, if you find someone that alleviates stress, that's very valuable to you. So if anyone owns a dog, we have a dog. Her name's Sparty, because like I mentioned, Michigan State. That was a compromise to get a dog. She had a boy or girl. I had to name it Sparty, but Sparty girl, we love her. She's a part of the family. She's a smaller dog, but it's stressful if we want to go on vacation, and we could take her to our beach house, which is fine. But most places we don't want to fly with her. So having someone, we might not want to board her. So we have a couple of families that we know in our neighborhood that watch her for a very reasonable price. Their kids absolutely love her. That's kind of so that stress of like, oh gosh, if we have a dog, is that going to kind of take away from our ability to travel or go do different things? And so anyway, even though something is like someone to help take care of your pet could be on your board of directors and alleviate stress.
I think one thing to add to that board of directors too is not just like the mechanic or the doctor, the CPA, but it's also having like friends around you that are also supportive or hold you accountable, because that's really what you need. And sometimes you need a friend to tell you that, that's a terrible idea, or like, yeah, you should go, kind of take that chance, take that risk, or, go invest in that property, buy that stock, start that business. Because some of your friends might be in your ear like, oh no, that's a bad idea, you shouldn't do it. But sometimes you need the other side of the perspective.
Right. And and as I've gotten older, I've realized that if someone, constructive criticism, I don't really mind it. And if someone does me some constructive criticism, my first thought is, thank you for trusting me enough to tell me that. Like, thank you, instead of me going on and it could be as easy as, hey, just something we're doing, like, hey, I'll use pickle, like you're doing the pickleball, because that's one of my favorite topics. But some people get really offended if you see something that they're doing, and I play it very competitively. So, hey, you could do something different on that shot. Thank you. I mean, you don't have to tell me that, and I'm going to accept that criticism, constructive criticism. Now, if you're telling me how to like change my shot, and you can't get the ball in, then I'll take it with a grain of salt. But yeah, I agree with you, Eric. I mean, having friends that can hold you accountable is huge, and because your friends, you want to have an unconditional storgic love with your friends. Like, I love these, my friends. That being said, if I see something that I'm like concerned about, or I would tell them like, hey, I love you, but maybe, man, you seem to like, I don't know, you seem to be kind of going off the rails in this part of your life a little bit. Just talk to me, tell me about it. Not trying to be your parent, but I'm there to be your friend, and not vice versa.
Yeah. You touched on a good one, which is, you gotta sometimes give feedback and criticism, but saying thank you and letting them know that's like a safe space for you. And, some of my friends might reinforce you with negative reinforcement, but sometimes you just gotta put some positivity into it, right? Like, oh, that wasn't a good shot in pickleball, but let's hold them here. And, sometimes I feel like that makes a little bit more of a difference when, I play pickleball as well. It's very, important to me. But, when I watch the people that are super competitive, cursing and screaming and yelling, even throwing a paddle, and I'm just like, whoa, it's not that serious, whereas like some of the more rec players will be like, oh, okay, let's hold them here. Let's get this point, or a little bit more encouraging and positive. And I think that can be much more useful depending on the person.
Absolutely. I would agree. Positive reinforcement is really good, and constructive, I don't want to say criticism, but just, is good. And yeah, I mean, we have to be open to it, and we have to, failing forward. I failed a lot. So that's why I even tell my kids, you learn way more from losing than winning. And it's just a matter of moving forward and figuring out, like, I've been in business over 20 years, like I said, and there's still things I do that I'm like, okay, that didn't work. So let me change it. Let me sharpen it. Let me see how we could be more efficient, or I do a lot of the initial consultations with potential clients for a private CPA practice. And I'm like, I've got to get to, my vetting and sales process has to be even sharper, because if I make a mistake, then I've wasted a lot of time, of their time and my time, even putting it together. And so maybe I misread the situation, and they would have been better off going in a different direction. So, yep, we still have to tweak things.
Yeah. And I think failing forward kind of, leads me into the next area that I'd love to get into, which is like, you've had a business for 25 years. You've kind of watched your kids grow up. Like, what kind of lessons do you want to pass on of you learning, building a business to your kids? Like, what do you hope that they kind of get from watching you build and operate this company, or multiple companies, truly?
Well, no, that is an awesome question. And unfortunately, in the accounting world, in the tax space, if you asked 100 accountants this question, probably 80% of them would say, I'm going to tell them not to be an accountant. And they probably don't want to be one, right? Because if I would have kept going down the path that I was going down when I had those aha moments, that would be the same thing. First of all, I don't want them to feel any pressure about going into anything. I want them to do something that makes them feel enriched, that makes them feel good about themselves. One of the things I've been trying to work with some of the younger people in our profession more, interns, and one of the things I've learned and try to tell them is truly work to learn, don't work for money. Money will come. Focus on relationships, don't focus on sales. Relationships are like, a sale is great, but a sale is maybe a one-off event. A relationship will continue to grow and expand. So I hope my children put their best foot forward. Obviously, it's cliche to try your best, but don't leave anything on the field. Try your best in what you're doing. Don't be afraid to pivot, and find the place in life that you feel like you're making a difference. That I don't want quite frankly, I don't want my children to hate their job. Like my dad kind of hated his job, right? And it was like, and he's such a great guy, and he busted his butt for our family, but he didn't like his job at all. So I want them to love what they're doing, and because when you love what you're doing, you're usually going to do a pretty good job, and that doesn't mean like, hey, I love operating a lemonade stand, but I want to live in a $5 million house. No, I mean, that doesn't, it's always going to work that way, but don't, just work to learn, develop relationships, and do something that you have a passion for. It doesn't matter I guess the final thing I want them to really understand, and I tell them this all the time. I learned this also. Comparison is the thief of joy. Keep the blinders on. In our household, there's only one judge, and it's not us. And we don't need to compare ourselves to everyone else, because you're never going to be happy with yourself if you constantly compare yourself to other people. Now, there's nothing wrong with, like in my profession, I have some really good friends that do certain things in their practice that I say, man, that's really cool. I admire that, or I might model that one little thing, but I'm not comparing myself to them.
Yeah, no, you really kind of hit the nail on the head when you said do something that makes you feel fulfilled, because I think, parents sometimes give you advice of like, oh, you should go to school, go to college, get a good job, get a high paying job. But that could lead you down the rabbit hole of, working a job that doesn't fulfill you, causes too much stress, makes you work hours, makes you call people on Easter, makes you, do things that really
Right.
just don't lead you to a truly happy life. Right. And then the other thing you touched on, which is like the focusing on relationships is huge, right? As cliche as they say, your network is your net worth. And, I think that's true, in so many instances.
I agree. And, when we say do something you have a love for, that doesn't mean like, hey, try to find the easiest job or be lazy or quit everything halfway through. Our children, especially one of them, my oldest, he's, what I admire about him is he's not afraid to try new things. He will, it could be, and he's finally found he loves music, and he's really diving into that. That being said, if he tried flag football and was like, I really don't like it that much anymore, that's fine. You've got to finish the season. We're not just going to call the coach and quit a team halfway through, unless you like broke your leg or something. Finish what you start. But also, don't be afraid to try something new, and don't pick a job just because it's easy. Like, the cool thing is, once you find the thing that you love to do, now, is every day rainbows and candy bars over here? No, but I really love what I'm doing. And I think our clients and my coworkers and the people I work with see that. And that's who I'd want to work with, right? What if you went to the doctor and they're like, oh gosh, it's, oh, okay, I get to leave in 2 hours. Oh, dang, man, that looks awful. What did you do to yourself? Why are you eating so many candy bars and all? And, you need someone that could be constructive, but gives you confidence and like wants to be there. So,
yeah. And I think the one phrase that I heard for like finding your passion or finding something that fulfills you is like, do something that makes you feel alive, right? And that phrase kind of stuck with me because I feel like so many people, maybe in my generation, maybe the Gen Zers, like are maybe unsure of like what does fuel them, what does make them feel alive, what does give them passion. And so honestly, you just have to try things, right? And I think you made a great point of you can't give up, just because it gets a little hard or you have a roadblock that's a little bit challenging. Obviously, there's circumstances like a broken leg where, you're obviously out of that. But generally speaking, like kind of pushing through some of those hard moments will kind of teach you a lot about yourself.
Oh, I like that. Do something that makes you feel alive. And another thing to consider is maybe like with maybe my parents' generation, you picked a profession and you were there, right? And that was what you did, and you didn't really have transferable skill sets, right? It's okay to like a lot of very successful CPAs and enrolled agents and tax professionals had a completely different career in the beginning and pivoted. So there's enough time to pivot on your career. Just if if you start off and you want to become an auto mechanic and you're a mechanic for 10 years and you're like, I really don't like this. I actually want to become a contractor. You can become a contractor, and all that experience of fixing things, working with your hands, dealing with customers, focus on those skill sets you could transfer to another career. So I think that's something different that, back the generation before me, you were a butcher, you were a mechanic, you were an accountant, and that defined you, and you couldn't, pivot or change at all. And I think that's very, some of the best teachers now, my wife's a teacher, a special ed teacher, and some of the best teachers now had a different career before and just were called to become a teacher. Or a couple of them were in the military, and thanks for their service. And they put 20, 25 years in, they're my age, and they're like, I want to be a teacher. I've got a pension. I'm okay, but I want to work with kids. So they never thought when they were in their military career, they'd be working in an elementary school, and they are like the best teachers. Everyone loves them, and they're pretty disciplined with the kids.
Yeah. And I think, these topics kind of bring us into what I'm going to call the signature question, as we wrap this up, which is, it's a topic I've always kind of thought about a lot. It's a topic that gets talked about a lot, mental health being a huge topic in today's society. And it's really like, what is happiness and what do you think your life purpose is? And it's something that's like really key for each person. And we kind of touched on it with like what makes you feel alive, what makes you, come to fruition, and also what makes you feel fulfilled. And so, I think that happiness it constantly changes, right? Is every day happy? No. Is every day sad? No. But knowing what happens to yourself mentally, emotionally, physically when you're in either a dark place trying to find the light, or maybe you're in the light place and you're trying to appreciate it. My life's purpose, I feel like I'm still on that journey and road, but as somebody that's a lot more experienced than I am, what are your thoughts?
Older, you could say older, Eric. It's all right. I love it.
What are your like thoughts on, if your kids ask you like, what does it mean to be happy, or what does it mean to have like what is my life's purpose? Like what would you kind of say to them?
Right. And, it didn't mean to interrupt you, but hey, you know what? Honestly, there's times of my life that I didn't think I'd make it to the age I'm at right now. So I'm every year that goes by is a blessing. Some of the things I learned the hard way is that when I would tell my kids that, especially when I was younger, I was like, oh, I can't wait to be 10. I can't wait because then I could ride my bike here, and I can't wait to be 16 and get my driver's license. And I can't wait to be, this age or this age. But the journey is the destination. Enjoy that ride. That's going to give you a lot more happiness. For me, I really want to use, so happiness would be, and what I tell the kids is to use my God-given gifts to help as many people as I can, and to leave things better than I found them in any capacity that I can, and be very appreciative of what what I've been given, not that I've been, I didn't find a pot of gold yet. And, but meaning given in life, good health, great family, the ability to help other people out, and the opportunity. I've been given a lot of opportunity, and I've worked very hard to take advantage of that opportunity. So with the kids, I'd say being happy would be just feeling good about your relationships that you've established, the work you're doing, and feeling like you make a difference to people. That's really it. It doesn't have. It could be in any way, shape, or form. It makes, when you make that difference to people, it makes you feel good. So that's what I would tell them, and enjoy this ride. Because my kids, not their age, like my 15-year-old's like, oh, I look forward to getting my driver's license. And I'm like, I look forward to it too, but I'm not rushing it. I look forward to it because that's 1/3 less of a taxi cab that my wife and I have to be. But I'm also not rushing it. That's what I would say. And, we all go through those kind of darker moments, and I like what you said, to appreciate those light moments, like, or those happy times. And, for people that are going through a dark moment, we've all been there. And I guess I'd say, just in my job, I kind of play partial psychologist with people, because I get people that are super anxious about, finance and taxes, and I can appreciate that. But hopefully, if you're in that dark space, that you can find people around you to bring you out of that, to bring you. I kind of feel like different people in your life can bring the good out of you, and then maybe could kind of pull some of those not so good moments out of you, and try to surround yourself with those people that are going to push you in a positive way and bring those good things out of you. And, at my age, like you alluded to, I call more mature age, more experience. That's a nice way of putting it. But like in my age, kind of talking about pickleball, and maybe one day we'll get on the court together. That'd be great. Like, my social network is pickleball, because it's men and women that, actually, it's the average age of pickleball has decreased significantly over the last 3 years. So I'm like on the older end of it. But, I don't want to go to, I'm okay not going and watching a sporting event at a bar for a couple hours. I'd much rather go outside and run around and get some exercise and have that companionship out there.
Yeah. And I'll touch on the pickleball part and that journey, because like I was impacted by a layoff, and, you obviously go to a very dark place, because when you've never been laid off, you're at a young age, no one around you was laid off except one of my friends. He was impacted by a layoff literally like days before me. So we were both kind of going through it together. And so, as corny as it may sound, like pickleball almost kind of saved me during that whole period, because it forced me to, like you said, get outside. I got to socialize. But the biggest key is that I wasn't attached to my phone, which is super hard these days because we're always very connected. And so pickleball was that only time where I actually didn't think about trying to find a job, interviewing, the stress of, when will my, severance be let go? And so, it's definitely important to get outside and to do those small little things that do make you feel alive.
I know, and that's so funny, because and luckily my wife likes to play, so she's not as hooked on it as me, but she really enjoys it. And we played in a mixed mixed doubles league last year in Nashville, and we just signed up again this year. So that could be a strain on our relationship, but she carried us to the championship last year, so that's good. So it's funny when I talk to people about it. I'm like, when I go and play, the last thing on my mind is my email or my logistics. Like, I know I need to leave by this time, but I'm not thinking about anything other than just winning that point, winning that game, having fun, getting exercise. So I agree 100%. It's a good escape. But that escape, I feel everyone needs that escape, but that escape could easily slip into something bad, could slip into substance abuse and other things that could happen. It can happen just like that. The other good thing about people like also my age with kids that play pickleball, our kids are very active in sports, and I see some of these parents going absolutely nuts at these sporting events, because I'm thinking to myself, they have absolutely no outlet for their own competitive edge, their own endorphins, their own. So they funnel that and yell at their kids when they're playing and get so wrapped. They're like, I want my children's teams to win, but I want them to have fun. But I'm so much more calm. Like, I have my own thing. I want them to. I'm not playing baseball anymore. My son is. I'm watching him play baseball. I'm not living through him. I've got my own stuff going on. So just random pickleball side note, but.
Yes. Yeah, no, I totally agree. And Chris, that's going to wrap up this episode today. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your journey. Where can listeners go to find more about you?
Right. Well, I would love to connect with the listeners. The best place to go that connects to our podcast, to all of my social media outlets, is chrispicciurro.com. So you're definitely going to probably want to check the show notes because it's quite a long last name, but chrispicciurro.com. The good news is there aren't that many people with my name, so you'll find me, even if you Google it and spell it wrong. But that'd be the best place to go. I'd love to connect with people and get some feedback from the listeners. And it's honestly, it's an honor to be a guest on the show, and I truly enjoyed our conversation.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I'm very grateful and appreciate you. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email or DM me, which will be in the show notes for my socials. Chris, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you.
My pleasure.